Welcome to Artist Trauma. This week we did The Family of Pascual Duarte. Duarte?
I was
I
saying Duarte, but that just sounds like very
Duarte.
American.
Okay. Well, it's fine. It's fine. We love this book. This was fun. This was really fun. This was Chris's choice, and we highly recommend it. It's a great example of the modernist weirdo tradition.
I would, yeah, modernist weirdo. It's often thought in the vein of Spanish response to French existentialism, consciously or not, it doesn't matter. It is also the start, I think, of a lineage of writers that you could put as rather nihilistic in a very like basic sense, and we'll get into why in a second here.
Yeah. So the
All the
book.
way up to I mean, the lineage ends with this lady, this crazy lady, Otessa Moshfegh.
Mhm.
Oh, and probably parts of Michelle Welbeck, I'm assuming, have some tendencies of this, is what I was
Yeah.
reading. I
Yeah.
haven't read him
It's
yet, though, so.
Yeah, no, it certainly fits. I think about No Longer Human of that side. I mean, that's on spot. The two are unrelated authors, but that broad attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the book is about. It's overwhelmingly just the writings of a man who is in prison. Just going over his childhood, marriage, various murders he commits.
And he's a deeply unreliable narrator in the traditional sense. He has his spin on every event. He makes his first wife, you can read between the lines, he attacks her, but you know, he spins it in a way where it's all good, everything's fine. Um, and it's a frame story. You have the story, the first thing you get is someone discovers this manuscript at like a drugstore.
Yeah, but you're in a fucking drugstore of all the damn things. I think it was because it was sent. It was like he was the only address the guy knew, so it
Yeah, and
was
so
sent
it's like,
there.
and that's a technique that's like in literary, it'd be heavily mediated. It's like I heard from my brother Paul, who went to the same church as this guy, and then they tell the story. And so it's basically functioning to say this is a very mediated story. But then it's a really, really weird first page because Duarte gives you a challenge, which is just very strange. In his own manuscript, which is his autobiography, he's like, look, burn it. But if it stays around long enough, don't burn it.
Then
And
that
you're
was
like,
clearly demonstrative of the will of God.
yeah, right, which is just the silliest fucking thing. I remember
It
laughing
fits. It fits because he's always
yeah,
talking about how it's fated, how everything in his life is fated.
yeah.
There was no helping the things that could happen. It was I've been reading a lot of Greek tragedies lately, and it it almost felt like that. The
Yes.
explicitness of the
Just willing after 18
fable.
months. How'd you decide on 18 months, Salah? It seems really specific for a god.
Yeah, that's I mean,
Actually,
it's a good number.
that was the first thing I read, and I kind of went, "Oh yeah, this is going to be really good. This is going to be really fucked up." um, so he finally gets into his life, and he's saying that he's telling this story as a confession, but rereading, because he does a lot of crimes. The basic summary is that he murders. He's kind of a lower class sort of like jackboot type of dude. He kind of kills. He gets into bar fights. He's very brutal.
I mean,
He has
yeah.
a
I mean,
easy relationship to morality.
it's more complicated because in the sort of Spanish culture, there's more of an honor culture than us
Yes.
people from the Northeast and Midwest. So like it is said, at least he reports that other people basically feel like, yeah, he killed his wife's ex-lover, just like any of the rest of us would have. Which I guess that would have been a semi-reasonable thing for someone in Spain in the 1930s. Um,
Doesn't the un I'm going to table this. I'm going to say that the unreasonableness emerges over the whole. That like because even the bar fight has a a sheen of cultural reasonableness to it.
Yeah, yeah. No, no,
Drama.
no. There's no like this is an unreliable narrator. But I think that it is playing is
Well, even the rape scene, right? It's like rape in our a modern definition. At the time, it's like it's somewhere in between coercion and oh, well, you took a woman, now you marry her. Sort of weird difference.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But in any event, his relationship to his own crimes is this. He says, I feel a certain sense of relief after writing down all that happened, and there are even moments when my conscience pricks me less. But then but then he kind of completely undermines that in the next paragraph by saying, you know, I'm heartily sorry now that I took the wrong turn, but I no longer look for forgiveness. Like, well, what the fuck was the previous sentence then? And he
Well,
goes,
it's not that he's looking. Well, I mean, no, you can have that of I regret what happened. I don't think I'll be forgiven for this, but I'll do this thing to at least slightly ease my conscience. Like I did something unforgivable, but this makes it a little bit better.
yeah, because his basic argument is I am too weak to resist my instincts, which is the gambit of the whole novel. Like, is he too weak to resist his instincts?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is also notable that like the first words of the manuscript proper are, "I am not, sir, a bad person, though in all truth I am not lacking in reasons for being one. We are all born naked, and yet as we begin to grow up, it pleases destiny to vary us as if we were made of wax. Then we are all sent down various paths to the same end, death. Some men are ordered down a path lined with flowers, others are asked to advance along a road sown with thistles and prickly pears, and so on." And it's like, yeah, it's like we're all born the same way, and just destiny varies us. It's like we don't have any control of our character. And well, again, the whole beginning is I'm not a bad person. I even had such a difficult background. I had lots of reason to be one. So it feels like a denial of like of doing anything bad.
Yeah,
um,
I mean, and then at the same time, so we don't get this in the English. This is written in a sort of brusque vernacular
yeah,
because it has to be. I mean, he's an uneducated lower class peasant, basically, if he suddenly started, but still, there's great moments of beauty. At the end of that first paragraph, he goes, there is a world of difference between adorning one's flesh with rouge and eau de cologne and doing it with tattoos that will later never wear off. Of course, he's saying, oh, woe is me. My tattoos are never wearing off, which is a choice. Sorry. After reading, like, it's like there's so many papers written about this book, and people are like literally like arguing his choice. And I think, well, if it's part of the existentialist position, at some level, he's in bad faith. He has to be.
I mean, it's the thing is like there is a fundamental ambiguity on this. I think that's what's going on.
Yes.
Because you have for instance just the transcriber who gets the first and last word of the book.
Yeah.
He says that it's like, well, we should really just take him as being. Let's see. Yes, this is the way he says it. Do you see what he does? Well, it's just the opposite of what he should do. But let us allow Pascual Duarte himself to speak, for it is he who has interesting things to tell us. It's as in it's like we should take him as the opposite of a good person. Like this is a model of misbehavior, which I don't feel is quite right. That doesn't
Oh,
like he's
it's very
not.
19th. It's like Salah himself is making fun of the 19th century position of going against God's version of sin will lead you down the path of disillusionment, which
Yeah.
is this is not a 19th century novel in
No, no.
any way.
Yes. I mean, this is the same thing as well, I mean, it's interesting, like because that's how, roughly speaking, that's how Lolita starts. Is it has a note of like, yeah, like this will become a classic in studies of pedophilic pathology. Like this particular person. It's like, is that quite the way we should read this? Is that really the approach?
And the answer, of course, is no. Salah. Salah's a bit of a weirdo in his journals of writing. So just to give his position, he once went on a radio program in the 80s.
Mhm.
He got bored, so instead of answering the lady interviewer's questions, he just interrupted and said, "Do you guys want to watch me put a gallon of water up my asshole?" And like he said, "I'll do it." And they cut the interview. So he's a very weird guy. In the introduction to The Hive, he wrote about all of his gastrointestinal struggles while writing the book. Strange man. So I'm just saying that, like, I think
Yeah,
that there's moments where he really is honestly messing with us in his writing.
yeah. The thing. Okay, I don't know about this creature he became in the 80s.
I mean, I guess it could just be crazy. So
Yeah,
who knows?
people do change. Like there's what's Patty Chayefsky. Like his first like works are just like these like sort of nice 50s style dramas where it's like, yeah, here's this butcher and he's a nice friendly guy and he's having trouble in his life and he's very lonely and it's really delicate, beautiful thing that we play one of his works, Marty, which is a movie I highly, highly recommend. I also read the screenplay. Later on, he writes fucking Altered States, which is like a
Really?
totally bonkers movie about
It wasn't a TV show, 2 seasons, right?
well, I don't know, but like it's maybe it's derivative, but like there's a movie and it's like at least like 40 minutes of it is just acid trips and like going to the core of existence, and it's like that man changed. He also wrote Network. In,
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
he also wrote Network, which is a fucking masterpiece. Um, so this guy, he changed a lot over the course of his
Uh,
life.
so I've read 3 books by Cela now.
Oh,
Or 4 books. I've read 4 books by Cela. I've read his last novel, which he lived until the 90s somehow. Made it through all the strife. Helps because he was actually a fascist, informing on his left-wing compatriots. So he's kind of an asshole. But he the last novel, he started writing in single sentences. So, and it's kind of like he tells the whole heart of a place. So what I noticed is that even though he might be crazy, his novels are all sane and completely different. I also read a travel book of his, which was pretty good. And if he goes crazy in personal life, he never goes crazy in writing. I'll say it that way.
I mean, one thing just in terms of like the craziness issue is I there's a certain way of okay, one way of thinking of schizophrenia, or at least like one sort of interpretation that I've heard and I find plausible on a certain level is for some of them is there's a certain sense of like what is this tedious bullshit called life? Like it's just so
Yeah.
banal and empty, and like and one thing that's interesting with schizophrenics, is like if you ask them a simple question, like they will give you an obviously wrong answer. But if you ask a more complicated question, which like engages their intellects, and many of them are very intelligent people,
Yeah.
they will actually want to work on it. They'll actually want to think it through. And there's a certain one thing also is interesting, like there's a certain obscurantism with many schizophrenics of like being purposefully obtuse. But if they actually want to communicate, they actually start to become quite clear. So there's a certain like there's one way of thinking is certain schizophrenics, which is interesting, is like there's a certain way of like what is this failed reality in front of me? I'm not going to conform to that. And so I don't know, maybe Salah is like on that wavelength of like, what is this bullshit of an interview? I don't want to like continue these banal questions.
For sure. I think that's a good point. And that would also line up with him being just more of a categorical pervert.
Yeah.
I'm gonna,
So
provoke you. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a good point. The
I
most
don't know if I'm right. I just wanted to put that
well,
as a hypothesis.
having read 4 of his books, one of the things in the literary sense that's very striking is there are through lines, of course, but he doesn't repeat himself. So this novel is about a horrible person, rural. The Hive which is his maybe other most famous novel, is about a cafe, and the main characters are just whoever is in the cafe more. So a completely different structure. It's sort of isorhythmic, you
Mhm.
know, people come in Monday, brilliant writing in a really wild way. And the last novel is told in a single batches of sentences. So he always was changing and innovating, like Joyce, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that is always something I respect a lot, and I mean, yeah, that's the way with Camus too. You know, it's
Yeah.
like every one of those novels are different. Um,
Yeah. So, finishing our summary, because it's funny, after getting through the frame novel, the events are rather easy to kind of outline. As the novel goes on, the most important early event is that okay, you guys have to read this book before this because it's actually really important that you don't hear us say with this before you read it because it's pretty shocking. Okay, he kills his dog, and he does it in a really matter of fact way after the dog looks at him in a way. Really insane, but it's very dark. And this sort of I wrote down that it is the first example of a knowing eye that sees something Duarte cannot or cannot accept about himself, is how I wrote it down. I don't know. I don't know how to write it down. Because
yeah,
it's
I
not the first
mean,
time. His mom gets it too.
well, the mother, the motivation for murdering his mother is less spurious in that she's just a horrible bitch to him, according to him, just constantly carping and harassing both him and his wife, and he
She's
just
sort of
does.
like a sociopath, right? Like she's pretty awful throughout the book. I mean, she's horrible to his younger brother in really evil ways. Like his younger brother or his brother's developmentally challenged and gets into a pig pen and has his ears eaten off, which this is
Poor
definitely
Mario. He just
brutal
has no
literature,
chances in
man.
this
That's
life.
like it's a really brutal stuff. But then like the mother's partner like kicks him at one point and she laughs or something like that. And it's like, oh, this is like a really horrible person, you know?
Yeah, like that I have to say, like, when the book really started to like go places for me, it was already, good. I respected it, but
Sure.
it's a little. I personally find this sort of Spanish Latin American modernism weird to like get into. It takes a while for me. Like, that's how it was with Bois. That's how it was with De Benedetto. It's like, oh, this is a whole attitude. When I got into it, though, it was like just with poor fucking retarded Mario, who's just like crawling across the floor, and yeah, his ear just gets bitten, and then just he bites like his uncle's leg, and the uncle is just like kicks him, and the ear is just pouring out blood,
Oh,
and he just smiles and laughs as if he had done something really good. The uncle, and I just like, this is the kind of gratuitous filth that I'm
yeah.
here for. You know,
Okay, well, if you like that, I'm gonna definitely be buying you a Tessa Moshveg. There's a whole story about a guy who can't keep his colostomy bag clean.
okay, I
But
don't. Okay, maybe not that.
no,
Maybe
no, you're gonna love it, I promise. But I'm with you, and it's so absurd, and yet at the same point, it's so what's the word for, I think that this type of almost nihilism sort of flattens things out, so you really everything becomes images and tactile. Like you see what's happening, not clouded by values. You're just like, wow, like watching a zoo almost.
yeah,
It's like watching monkeys throw shit at each other at a zoo.
yeah, like this is the thing that like dominates the Spanish language, not literature, modernism.
Yeah.
Is just this sort of like, it's an absurd universe that just stares at you uncannily. And you're just seeing it through this very warped lens of him. Maybe he has opinions about things. Like, this guy, I have to say, actually, relatively speaking, Pascual Duarte is one of the more sane protagonists, it feels like. Like he's a shittier person. He's shittier, but he's much he's much better than the protagonist of Asleep in the Sun or Zama. Um, it's less like he does less things from sheer capriciousness, as it were.
So this is going out on a limb here, and this is going to be wrong, but I just have to say it because I think it's something I want to research later. Is Spain's sort of in between. It's like in between, and I'm counting the Spanish diaspora, the whole of the world, but there's sort of like an in between colonialized and colonized, and you got the Moors. You, it's not really Europe proper. I'm not a
Well,
racist, but you know
what
what
they
I mean?
said,
Like,
I think what they said in the 18th century is Africa starts the Pyrenees. You
yeah, yeah. And
know.
and so what you get like you probably get a lot more mix from myths that we just don't hear as much about. Lineages from North Africa that don't make it into Michigander and Maryland people's brains. I'm kind of extrapolating and I'd love to learn more about it, but I do think the sense that in general Spanish literature has an in-betweenness to it. Like it feels sort of uncanny, whereas it just has a difference to it. And I
Well,
just wonder if
it's
it's related.
radically different because, like, when I think about, I mean, other sort of, more Northern European modernists like Hampson or Mann or Hess, it's completely different. Like, it feels much, yeah, I mean, it's sort of an absurd world. It's sort of an absurd universe, but I don't know. It feels a little more self-possessed, even when it's come completely bonkers. It still feels self-possessed in a way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
there's something almost like animistic about some of these books where it's like that stone, it might be alive. And you're like, what? But not in an Hampson sense of like a, Pan waking up and being there. Not like that. Um,
I mean,
yeah,
like, just like one of those moments from like De Benedetto that we talked about was just like, we're down at the horse races, and a man is sleeping, and some hideous spider crawls along his face. The man then sweeps it off, and you see it like horrifically crippled off in the distance. And it's like there's just what it feels so significant. It feels like a bigger deal than anything else in the novel, but like it's
it's
that.
not just the handful of authors we've read on the thing. It's other authors that you and I have read outside of it. Like Jose Donoso's The Obscene Bird of Night fits this perfectly. The main character is either a house, six elderly women, or a little boy. It's like very odd. It's like Twilight literature. It's not nighttime, it's not daytime. Um,
But it feels very specific.
it
it,
does. It has a very
it
specific
feels
feel.
very specific while being very ambiguous.
Yeah. And I think, that's gonna you can give it any word you want. I don't think this is not magical. This is not magical realism. But it is weird how in reading Cela, the brutal realism of this book still feels a little uncanny. It's like it doesn't feel like Jane Austen's realism. It's not, it's like realism, but I almost want to use the phrase hyper realism, not in a Baudrillard sense of like a virtual, but like in the sense of like, if you stare at a wound long enough, that's a form of reality, I guess.
I mean, yeah. There's something. No, I feel like there's a point to this. Of like, there's a certain kind of. I mean, it feels actually what it reminds me of is Lady Sarashina. Um, because of
Yeah.
just like because it's these like just like these different little random events in my life. Some of them important, but a lot, but some of the biggest and most important ones are left out. Like that's,
Yeah.
it,
There's a
it's
certain blackoutness to it.
Yeah,
It's
and well,
almost like an
it's
erasure text where it's like you have the full event of a life, which would be like 400 pages instead of 150, and then you just take a marker and black out the life until
yeah.
you have its
Well,
journal.
maybe we shouldn't talk about this already, but like, I was I felt so much admiration for how this book ended. Um,
Yeah. Oh, the ending was like one of my favorite endings because it kept alluding to other murders that aren't in the book.
yeah, it's
It
like
was
what the
so
fuck is?
good.
Okay, I thought we were like because okay.
Yeah,
Just the structure of it, everybody
yeah,
is
yeah.
of
You
like
gotta
you
explain it.
have like it's like you know he's in jail for a murder.
Which is where
And
he writes these memoirs, and that's
yes,
part. That's why they're here.
and there's like several moments when you think, oh, this is it. As in, like when he gets into this bar fight, like on after his honeymoon, and it's like, oh, he stabs the bartender, and like, isn't that no, that was just a fight between the boys, whatever. Oh, he like he kills his wife's ex lover, and like, oh, that's the reason why. And, like, no, no, that was just like a quick like 3 year thing, whatever. Then
Mhm.
like you get to the very end of the book, and it's like, oh yes, he fucking just murders, just throttles his like mother. Like no, as it turned out, no. Like during he got back out, and there's all these years during the Spanish Civil War. He's doing stuff, and he kills Jesus, who is just mentioned, whose house
He's
is
not even a
mentioned
character.
at the beginning of the book,
Oh
and like
yeah,
once or twice
yeah.
otherwise, and it's like we don't even get there.
I
We
thought
don't
that
even get
was
to that murder, and there's another one besides that, I think.
that was like they mentioned two murders that aren't even included in the book, and so it's like the whole meaning of his life changes in the frame narrative to like a serial killer, basically. Like it kind of reminds me of the Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley type of guy.
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
in the movie and in the book, it's like he murders people, but he's in a hysterical rage, basically. And it's not the same as this because this is kind of lampooning the hyper masculinity of rural Spain. But there is a similar, he would never kill you on the street. He's not that type of, he's not Jeffrey Dahmer, but I mean, don't drink with him. God.
yeah. I mean, and again, I just have to, since we're already just talking about the ending, and we'll go back to earlier parts, but like, I just love the last little bit of the book where it's like, you're getting these like letters from people who, like, like the warden and the, whoever, whoever's the religious person in a prison
Hmm.
chaplain. And they're saying things, and I just love how like the prison warden, like, after describing how he died, which is interesting in itself, but like, he just adds a little thing, like a little postscript to his letter saying, "Your letter took some time to reach me, which is the reason for the delay between the two dates of our letters. It was forwarded to me from Badajoz, and I received it here on Saturday the 10th. That is the day before yesterday. Farewell." And then from the transcriber, what more can I add to the words of these two gentlemen? I just love how it's like this little irrelevant, dry detail about why the letter was delayed.
Yeah.
That gets included. like that,
Yeah.
like that's almost the last word in the goddamn book. I feel so much affection for this.
I feel a lot of affection for this novel as a whole. And I feel like it's also like, so in my version of it, I have this older copy, and you have a really nice copy. God,
Yeah.
I just
By the
think,
way, I just like it's orange. The inside of the cover is orange.
oh yeah, it's a good
I don't
reprint.
know. I just find that exciting.
So
Um,
he says, so Salas, to give you like, I think it's good. I don't think the character of all authors is relevant to every piece of writing. I don't really care about, well, a lot of people actually, but in this case, I just think his epigraph at the beginning that I have really is there. I dedicate this 13th and definitive edition of my Pascual Duarte to my enemies who have been of such help in my career. Okay.
that's just that's
It's kind of perfect, right? It's kind
I
of
mean, it's such a beautiful. I mean, I feel like that's something Pascal Duarte would say. Um,
is, but at the same time, I also get the sense that that's Salah being fully on it. Like it sounds like a joke, but I don't actually think he's joking. It's like there's a sort of like tired irony there of like, oh man, I've been working at this a long time. It keeps getting banned in, Spain. It keeps doing this, Thank you all for making me be a better writer.
yeah, I maybe I'll do that one day. That'd be endearing. Um,
I wish I had as many enemies as you.
yeah, I do, unfortunately. Although I don't know. I guess they're not important enough. Uh,
That would be the real thing because he sort of elevates his enemies here.
yeah,
You know, but,
unfortunately.
yeah, there you go. So I saw. Oh my God, I think my dog's gonna bark, but just if he does, sorry. Mailman's getting here. I found a great article actually about. It was sort of an overview of all the interpretations of the book.
Mhm,
And it was by, it's called Ambivalence and Ambiguity in the Family of Pascual Duarte.
mhm,
And it's kind of in agreement with everything we've been saying. But there is actually a great passage from R.D. Laing, the guy who wrote about schizophrenia,
mhm,
a psychologist and psychoanalyst. He wrote, we're talking about the look of the dog. So in this book, a theme that's running throughout is that, a creature looks at the main character and Duarte just can't fathom it. And he can only fathom it in like getting rid of the eye, in a sense. Or however you want to say it. However he kills the dog, it's fine. But R.D. Laing says this. To the schizoid individual, every pair of eyes is a Medusa's head, which he feels has the power actually to kill or deaden something precariously vital in him. And I just wonder if you agree, if that fits the interpretation of the eye in the book, or if that's something else.
yeah, I think that's relevant. I guess one issue though is it doesn't feel to me like it's like a repeated theme throughout the book. Like it feels like the other characters, and the other ones he kills are just like, it's fairly straightforward reasons. Um, unhinged. These things are, but um, it's like, yeah, like why did you stab the bartender? Well, the bartender was making telling a very pointed story about a wife stealer. Like why do you kill your ex-wife's lover? It's like, well,
Hmm.
there were very good motivations for that. Why do you kill your mother? She's a bitch. She's a horrific bitch. Like these aren't like these aren't examples of the telltale heart where it's like, the guy kills the old man just because his eye keeps staring at him. It's like it's like, okay, yes, it happened once with his dog, which
Thought it happened twice. I just don't remember, and so I might be wrong.
yeah, maybe it does happen a little more, but it just felt like this is when he killing the ex-wife's lover. It's like, yeah, he just that ex-wife's lover just couldn't shut up. He didn't see he was beat. Um, you just had to keep egging the guy on, at least according to
I
Pascal.
mean, okay, in image sense, you are right. However, in actuality on the page, when he turns his gaze to his own mother, it gets a little telltale hardy. I mean, he writes this.
Oh yes, yes, like that. Well, I mean that whole like scene of him standing in her bedroom, and he's just like in a panic of indecision of like, well, if I go back, she'll hear me, but if I
Well,
kill her, maybe I don't want to kill her.
this is the chapter where he starts thinking about his mom, or fixating, in the Edgar Allan Poe sense. Sudden starts suffocate us for a moment, but then they are gone, and we go on living. The thoughts that drive us to the worst forms of madness, to the deep brooding of sadness, always approach stealthily and slowly and almost unperceived, just as the fog invades the fields or consumption the lungs. Edgar Allan Poe could have written that in the Telltale Heart, you know? I mean, obviously he would have had more his like exclamation marks and all capital letter writing, but you know. Um, okay, so I'm gonna take you right. So I'm gonna edit my thesis a little bit on the opening chapter with the dog.
I do feel it's really important. That's an opening chapter. Like it's really important. This like
Well, it feels like it
it's a
sets him
mood
off.
setter.
Maybe it sets him off against other like there is a sort of ambiguity between him and like people. Just all just you know, like his mother, yeah, but like anyone can reveal themselves to him as being a liar or not who he the bad object, I guess. You know, like there's a potential in all people. Actually, this is something I think makes the book brilliant, is that in all people, I started reading by the second half, he has the potential to murder. Like it can go bad for anyone. And you know, I mean, he could kill, right?
Um, well, this is where it gets complicated
Yeah.
in a big way for me. Is the protagonist keeps writing about how like the things that happen in his life are inevitable, and like it's fate pulling him along, and like okay, one moment I really loved, like towards the
Yeah.
very end, is like this is like the day on which he was, he's going to end up murdering his mother, and he's just sitting there with his wife, and he says, My wife must have noticed something strange about me. What are you planning to do? Nothing. Why? I don't know. You act so odd. You're imagining things. I kissed her to ease her spirit. It was the last kiss I ever gave her. How far I was from knowing that. If I had known, I might have shuddered. What's the kiss for? Her question brought me up short. Why shouldn't I give you a kiss? I thought over her words. She seemed to know all about what was going to happen, as if she had already walked down that particular street. I just,
That's really good.
yeah, I mean, it's so good on so many levels, that because of just the fact that there's just that feeling. There's just that weight of like a crime that is developing behind him, and like there's whole like,
Mhm.
it's almost like there's like pages of it beforehand about like, the way like it builds up and you become like this. Yeah, yeah. We spend weeks in the same condition without any change. The people around us become accustomed to our sullen gloom. Our strange behavior no longer strikes them as strange, but then one day the evil grows like a young tree and fattens, and now we no longer speak to anyone. Once again we become an object of curiosity, as if we have a lover mooning, as if we were a lover mooning with love. We get thinner and thinner, and our once bristly beard grows lanker each day. We begin to droop from the hatred consuming us. We no longer stand to look into another's eyes. Our conscience burns in us, but so much the better, let it burn, like so on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reminded of I think you're exactly right. I think that
I
relates to
just want to say one more thing about it, though. Like,
oh, and yeah, yeah,
I
of
just
course.
love that feeling of like there's something wrong. There's something wrong, and
Yeah.
there's nothing to do about it. Like your wife is like, yeah, it's like it's inevitable, and like he's looking at her as if it's inevitable, and like that's one part of it, is like there's that aspect. But he's a completely unhinged individual, and this is unreliable narration. How can we trust a goddamn thing in this book?
Well,
So it's
actually,
like, is that really the viewpoint? It's unclear.
it's unclear, and I also think that like you have to interpret the novel the way, well, to give a clue, I mean, in the most simple terms, even that description of what his wife saw is him, you know, describing it, right? Because it's all written from his perspective. It's kind of like there's a great episode of Rick and Morty where Morty's trapped in the video game and there was a power surge. So Morty's ego has become a billion people in the video game. And Rick has to come in and convince every Morty on the planet to leave so that he can become one non-fractured ego. It's a brilliant thing. But like, you know, so there's scenes from Family Life where the guy's like, I don't want you founding this new religion. We're different people. And then the daughter goes, well, we're Jewish. Yeah, we're Jewish. And then she goes, well, what do we celebrate? And he was like, you know, old timey stuff. He doesn't know what they celebrate because he's just whatever Morty knows about Judaism. And I think that's the lens in which part of the book is brilliant is once you go, oh yeah, so he does realize there's an ambiguity in how he thinks of fate, even if it's not conscious. Because if it's fully conscious, he wouldn't he probably wouldn't murder his mother, or he would have murdered his mother earlier, maybe.
I mean, it's strange the complex of things here. Well, I mean, the way it's presented is like, yeah, it's just this seed, this evil seed that like builds inside of him and then comes out, and there's nothing he really could have done.
Right.
Like one aspect of how it's presented, and the same thing with sort of the other actions that happen. But then there's a sense in which he's like his consciousness is deeply bothered and disturbed by what he's done. Like he talks about how his conscience is like
Yeah.
pricks him over all of this stuff. And I mean, you can. How do you interpret that? I mean, and one thing you can say is like, well, someone can feel. I mean, someone can have like a deterministic attitude, but still feel like a sense of guilt on some level. Like, as in a lot of times it doesn't. Of like, no, I couldn't help it. Like, yeah, like I just was an incidental person here doing this. But you could also be like, yeah, but like I was forced to be this monster. I look at myself and I'm a monster. You know, I was forced to be one, but it's horrific. It's kind of like an Oedipus Rex thing where
Correct. Yeah.
it's like Oedipus Rex is like, yeah, like I didn't mean these things, but now I'm horrifically stained by these the most nightmarish things one could imagine a person doing.
I think that's the complicated side. Everything we've been talking about the last 10 minutes, and it's there. Obviously, this is a great novel, and all of that deepness is there. On a different note, just coming from my experience as a composer, um, this is also in the world of realism a fan a, and just a fucking accurate portrayal of the criminal mind. So, like, I was watching a court case, all right, and a guy goes, "I want to represent myself." Something that probably Duarte would also do, and the judge is like, "It's a really bad idea. You're going to lose." And he goes, "Well, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life so far. Why not add one more?" And this is in reality. This isn't a novel. I thought that was a great fictional. And I thought, okay, yeah, like that's similar. And the final end of the court case is he goes, well, actually, I don't even care if I'm found guilty. I just kind of want to have fun. It's only 3 years of my life for this case. Which, and that's sort of like the criminal. I mean, I sound really 19th century by saying the criminal mindset, but not like just because a person who's stealing bread or not, just like that sort of fundamental ambiguity towards your own situation. It was very similar to Pascal Duarte. It's like, okay, wait, so do you feel bad or do you situationally feel bad that, if situations turn, okay, it actually went all right. Like it does seem there's like a sometimes lack of consistency in a sort of quote unquote criminal.
Yeah, it's
Well,
yeah,
really quick. So on that same thing, here's my second example.
yeah.
There was a murder in my there was a murderer who went to high school with me. Before he was a murderer, he was a marijuana dealer. He was a marijuana dealer who drove like a red Camaro his parents gave him. So like not exactly undercover for doing illegal shit. No, you saw a red Monte Carlo. It was a red Monte Carlo, even more distinct. So you see it everywhere around town. It haunted the town because that was where he was dropping off drugs. Already kind of funny. So he stabbed his sister's ex-girlfriend to death. He showed up at her house and murdered him in cold blood because his sister told her, "Oh, well, he's abusive. He broke my arm." The sister was lying. He didn't break her arm. And so in a rage, the guy showed up and just murdered him. And I'm like, "Oh, that's a Pascal Duarte murder, based on a lie, getting really hyped up, and then he just stabs the guy."
Yeah,
It's
I
something, it's just, it's all part of it. Like, if I'm going to make an object called the criminal mind and kind of entertain that it exists, it may not.
well,
I think the
I do
novel
think no,
is a study of it. It's a
yeah,
great study of it.
I do believe. I mean, I think it's a very complicated issue, obviously, but I do believe there's something to the idea of a criminal mindset, and I've heard things about it. Like, it makes sense. I mean, I don't know when you do like real proper crimes,
Yeah.
like not like where it's like and they consistently. It's not like, oh, I shoplifted once when I was a kid. It's like, no, like you commit assaults, you commit thefts regularly, like as an adult. It's like there's something. I mean, I've heard things about like how the kind of mentality that goes in, and to me, it makes sense of like, yeah, like there's something different about someone who has that level of lack of empathy for other
Hmm.
people, and the rest of us, like it does
Yeah.
strike me that there's something different here, like, and there is this kind of short-sightedness and lack of impulse control and
And in Duarte's
willingness
case,
to put things together.
it's not a problem of empathy for Duarte, right? Because he cares about the people around him. It's it's sort of like it's almost like more fundamental. Like, I promise I will try to care about your stupid laws. Like, I promise I'll try and accept them as real. Whereas most of us from a young age are just sort of ingrained with the law. Like, you don't hurt people, just basic stuff, not even
Yeah, well,
interesting.
yeah, because, well, I mean,
And
it does.
it just didn't stick for him. And so now it's always an ontological problem.
I mean, I don't actually read, like, at least the way that Duarte reports it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't feel that that's what's going on here. Like, it
Yeah.
feels more or less like, well, like he understands things and how they make sense. It's just generally speaking, he's very impulsive. Like he's dominated by these sorts of things that like cause him to feel slighted or want revenge or to kill that bitch. Um,
But he has enough empathy to love the people around him, but not enough empathy to feel like he feels bad, obviously, but I don't think he feels that bad. I mean, okay, like just like to be really boring about it, he doesn't feel as bad as I would feel about this shit going on. I mean, like some of the bar fight one, okay, I would get over, but the dog, no, God. Or like, there's other things in this book where I would just be haunted my whole life.
remember when he
But
stabs the horse for kicking for
yeah,
kicking
right,
his
like
wife in the
animal
stomach?
abuse or like
Was
assault or like all these things. It's like,
stabbed like
the
20
bar.
times.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I don't, by the way, first of all, I also don't think Cela is making the boring point beneath all of us is the animalistic. Like, I never get that sense that there's that level of
The thing is, like,
empathy with us to him.
like uh, Duarte is not an animal. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't come off that way. It's like he's more or less reasonable, and he's just okay. He's got honor culture things that are common, and I don't know. One thing that like this little episode is like he's walking along with some friend he meets in Madrid, and this friend starts like getting into this vicious argument with someone else, just like with the worst level of obscenities, and no violence spurts out. And he says like it was amazing, no violence spurted out. Like we have no we the if we could comport ourselves with that level of self control in the country, then the prisons would be empty. Um,
Because he's like amazed at that level of restraint that others, he's like, wow, I've never seen restraint.
yeah, it's like those aren't. It's
And
like yeah,
my parents aren't that.
fighting words don't have to be fighting words.
It is funny. It reminded me of there was one time it was in a Maryland gas station. It was like a liquor store and like it was an African American older gentleman and an Asian lady who owned the place. And they were just trading horrific threats at each other. Like just I can't say any of them on YouTube. Like the level of like assaultiness between the two. And then like the whole race, they were both like super racist. But then they weren't. They actually loved each other and they left and they had been playing the dozens. And it was like one of those things where I was like, wow, that wouldn't fly in Utah, the most PC culture I've ever lived in my life. Whereas, like there's no ambiguity there. But, but that would be it kind of reminded me of that scene where you're right. He was like, he was going and it was just so, they're trading. Do you think that's partially because, you know, Cela is also just showing how shitty his upbringing is? He never saw restraint in anyone around him in that way.
Yeah,
Or is
I
it
mean,
kind of a boring point?
could be. I mean, it could be is relevant to that. I mean, I do because like the impulse control issue is a mid big theme. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
that is
Oh
playing
yeah.
into that. It's like, oh, there's other people who don't do that. I mean, but also just like the upbringing. I just want to quote one of the sections. This is
Yeah, yeah.
when his like sisters being born
Mhm.
and his father, and it's a horrific like birth for the mother. And the father comes in and says, my father had been pacing about the kitchen in great strides for some time. As soon as Rosario was born, he came up to my mother's bed and, without the least regard for her situation, began to call her a hussy and a slut, and to slash at her with a buckle end of his belt with such violence that to this day I am surprised he did not finish her off then and there. Then he marched out, was gone for 2 days. When he did come home, he was drunk as a skunk. He staggered to my mother's bed and kissed her. She let him kiss she let him kiss her. Then he made for the stable to sleep it off. just just sure, yeah. Yeah, this is an episode from your childhood. Your father nearly beats your mother to death after she gives birth.
Yeah.
Like it's just a sheer like pointlessness, the gratuity of the violence. It's beautiful.
I was also
Um,
while you were reading that, it reminded me and thinking of the horror of the images and everything. I think there's a subtle theme in the book of like so why does he have impulse control? Okay, his upbringing or something boring. It doesn't, whatever. He has impulse control and well, that's about as arbitrary of a thing as someone could have. Your parents didn't raise you right, you have a problem in the brain. So then he misinterprets it as faith. But if you think about it, it's kind of like the opposite of fate. And I think there's sort of a dichotomy there that's really almost an unsolvable contradiction. Like from the outside, impulse control is like not fate. It's literally circumstances that push the chemical buttons. But then from the inside, it's like, oh yeah, it was fated to happen because this alignment of the stars made me lose control.
I mean, okay, when Fate is talked about,
Mhm.
there's multiple ways of thinking of it. Of one is just the good old like, yes, the gods prophesied. There's a prophecy from the gods saying that like this end I will come to no matter what.
Right.
There's that view, and but then you can have a more like informal view of fate where it's like, yeah, like we're determined, like in a mechanistic way, like just the way the billiard balls of atoms are going to play out is already determined.
True.
And it's like so they got like that isn't fate with a capital F. That is like a mysterious force guiding our lives and actions with a in a predestinarian fashion. It's not that, but you can kind of call it that in a certain way. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's my fate. This particular, it's like I couldn't help it.
I think
Um,
I think that's the stakes of the novel. I think you've just like outlined like in a Hegelian sense, like, oh, it's not A or B, but the horizon of A, the tension of A and B, like that's
yeah,
the novel.
yeah.
That's the whole novel right
Let's get
there.
another
In my
like example of this. This is like
Yeah.
right before he like is about to stab the bartender Don Manuel for making
Yeah.
uh a pointed story. Um, then the urge. Let's see. Later, I learned that Don Manuel had said that I was just like a rose in a dung heap. Oh, no, this is completely different. I'm sorry, this is completely different. This is completely irrelevant to what I was going to say, but whatever. This is just someone saying something about him. Um, okay, sorry about that.
No, 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 it's
Later,
fine.
later, I learned that Don Manuel had said that I was just like a rose in a dung heap, and God knows I was seized by a fury to throttle him on the instant. Then the urge blew over, and since I am naturally quick to change even when violent, in the end I forgot it. Besides, after thinking it over carefully, I was never very sure of having understood the remark. Like as not, Don Manuel had not said any such thing. It doesn't pay to believe everything people tell you. Even if he had said it, who knows what he might have meant? Who knows if he meant what I thought he meant? It's just such a great thing of like, yeah, I had this very intense feeling, and God knows if that had anything to do with the reality going on. And I just love that inscrutability of this remark of what the hell is meant by being a rose in the dung heap. Like, it sounds like an insult, kind of, but what could be meant by this? Um,
Yeah. And also like it shows that again, he's not going to murder you and I just hanging out on the street. You wouldn't even feel that threatened. Well, actually, yeah, I would, but only because I know read his book. But like because there is this reflective capacity. He's not handicapped. I mean, he's handicapped by a lot of things in his life, but he's not in the sense that like I feel like there's a tragic aspect of this book, is what I'm trying to say. Like there's like in moments like that, you go, "Oh, you could theoretically have done the work not to kill people."
mhm. Uh, I mean, this
And then
is.
it'd be like a horrible novel, of course, but like there has to be a slight like a slight here's what it was. Aesthetically, it would be really boring if Pascal Duarte just had autism. Like you'd be like, "Oh, that's like sad. He's like differently able." You know what I mean? Like you have to present him in the existentialist sense as having the same faculties on a basic level as you or I. Otherwise, the novel loses its charm.
I mean, I one thing is that okay, one thing on this issue about free will in sort of
Yeah.
modernistic or even just kind of, I'm not going to say existentialist literature, but literature written by existentialists and fellow travelers. Um, it doesn't really feel like free will actually is a role in a lot of them. Like in like Camus, in Camus literature, it's like yeah, he doesn't really have these characters don't really have free will. It feels like it's like why exactly does Marceau kill the Arab? Well, it was hot. The gun went off. The
Yeah.
trigger was pulled. Like it's in the passive voice, and it's like and like the nausea. It's like is this a do these does the main character really have free will here? It doesn't. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't do
I mean, I think,
anything in the book.
yeah, I mean, I think like so I mean, there's a million takes on free will. In being in nothingness, free will is a sort of labor of the negative. Like, a negation. In other places, it's interpreted differently as literally a refusal. Um, I think I think it's hard, right? Because like there's also an idea of making an existentialist morality play where you show a person who's in bad faith, who has the faculty but doesn't exercise it as an illustration of the existence of the faculty in general. I think that it is so complicated that I want to write like a book. Because like it De Benedetto in Free Will, I don't know. My brain just does, that Calvin and Hobbes episode thing where it goes, his mom goes, "Calvin, why are you doing this?" He's doing something stupid, and the bubble shows his brain just go. And I, I
Yeah,
feel I feel
yeah.
like that, but it's also not irrelevant. Obviously, it is exceedingly relevant to all these books, the issue of free will. I think I think I just need to keep reading more. I don't know if I have a theory.
Yeah, I don't know how, because like okay, one thing is, if it weren't for the frame narrative,
Yeah.
then I'd more or less just read this as like, your typical kind of naturalist novel where it's like, yeah, I don't have control over my actions. Like, it was all kind of fated. It was this way, but like there's some way, and I kind of want to put it that way also. Like, well, maybe that is actually what's going on. Like, it's like, we are kind of supposed to believe in Pascual Duarte, but it's, given the frame narrative, given this is unreliable testimony that is incomplete and done by someone who has, at least in other letters, his ethos has been undermined.
Yes.
Um, Most notably by just like the whole thing of like, he's goes and says right before he's going to die, be executed, God's will shall be done, which people say, oh, that impressed us very much, but then he started to beg and plead. Then he fainted when he saw the scaffolding, and he started to beg and plead and say it's so awful the thing we're doing. We would drag him to the stool. Um, there was no dignity about it. Whatever, he did the worst thing you can do as a person being executed, which is to show your suffering to others. Like, that's just, which, I
It's a
mean,
little
I guess
funny.
it is funny, but I mean,
Gonna die.
I guess one thing you could say about it is that it's like, yes, he does have the view that we're helpless, that we're deterministic creatures, and he is also a deterministic creature who can't help but shiver in terror at his oncoming execution.
Yeah, I
He
mean, I think
also
that would be,
attempts impulse control.
I think it'd be from one commandment to another. So, like, it'd be the first one to be a commandment from the symbolic superegoic injunction. You face your death with a relative amount of dignity, always dignity. So he goes in and he first has the symbolic injunction, and then there's the injunction from the real of, oh God, I'm gonna die, everyone. I hate everyone. And I think they're both sort of injunctions, you know? I mean, like, you're gonna be faced with real death. I guess I'd beg. Why not? It might work. Like the people who it's great that he continued. More simply, isn't it great that Cela let us get to him slobbering at the end? I thought that was great. He didn't die with it wouldn't have been in his character to just have one response.
Yeah, it's, yeah, like I do really like that. And I do like the fact that like the way other people around him look on him is like, yeah, he was just like crazy, later on. Like, he was doing these, like, he was fasting 3 days a week, out of guilt for his crimes. Um, there's, he's like constantly obsessively writing. It's I don't know. There was other things that were mentioned.
I
Those
mean,
are,
I think there isn't there an example that like I'm gonna make a broad statement about human nature. I swear I'm not making a giant argument about people, but like so in general, to get things done, we have to first assume a level of authenticity. I don't mean authenticity existentially. I mean just like, if someone says this candy bar costs $1.50, that it does, or plus tax. Like there's a certain like you go and meet someone, my name's Bill. If they're lying, that's a secondary thing. The first thing is you take it as a pragmatically true, if not ontologically true, that they're telling the truth. We have a sort of earnestness to get anything done in the public sphere whatsoever.
yeah, no, no. I mean, like, the fact that somebody says something is evidence that it's true. Now, it might not be good evidence overall, and there are things that contradict it, and but like
Yeah,
that's usually just the
true.
fact it's said prima facie. Like, yeah, that I'll believe that.
And we kind of I just accept the argument that we sort of, in order to have a society, we have to sort of have a basic disclosure to that as the basic thing, and then the lie is secondary. Obviously people are lying all the time, But to make things function in the social sphere, we have to just assume a level of truth. And truth may not be the right word, but earnestness or just like
No, I
functionability.
mean, this is a
Yeah.
fundamental aspect of human society. If everyone
We
was
have to.
criminals, it'd fall apart.
Yeah.
If we can't rely on what like, if you can't rely on what math textbooks say, then I say, well, this is going to fall apart.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Your bridge will fall apart. So, and that's why like shows like Rick and Morty, Rick is constantly undermining that. Oh, that fundamental earnestness was actually a lie. There's a spoiler alert in season 6 where I did you seen season 6? Can
I
I
don't
spoil
know.
it?
I haven't seen season 6.
Okay, I won't do it. But basically he's like lying for like there's a bit where it's like he's lying about something really major for like episodes. But it turns out okay because and it's the theme. Everyone goes, "Oh, I assume you're honest," and then he reveals he's not. I think that that is also a theme in our searching for Pascual Duarte's humanity. Is there's sort of a there's still a game afoot for him still, even when we assume earnestness.
Now, one thing that's interesting in this connection with like earnestness is also his
Mhm.
like attitude to writing. Because it happens around like midway through the book, a little later on, of where he starts talking about like the fact that, oh yes, I was released early from my
Yeah.
sentence for killing my wife's lover. So and that undermined my life. If I'd had to serve my full sentence, that would have been great. Then my life would have been better. But if I hadn't, I wouldn't have. And then what he says after he does that is, this philosophy of mine did not come to me the first time I wrote this section in the following 2 chapters. But the first draft of this part of the story was stolen from me, though I still can't understand why. The theft may strike you as so unlikely that you will not believe what I am saying, but nevertheless I was much saddened by this meaningless theft and exhausted by the work of repeating what I had already written. My memory was forced, and my ideas magnified out of all proportion, and thus was born my philosophizing. I don't think my penitence, which is as great as my poorness of spirit will allow, though it may be too small to cover my sins, would in any way be served by my suppressing my own words. Therefore I incorporate these wordy thoughts in my story just as they occur to me, and I leave you to judge them as you think best. There is a certain like preoccupation he has with like, I want to do it the first time. I want to tell you the first time, and all of these extra thoughts that I end up putting here, well, those are just the results of me like saying it again. There's some other part where he mentions that of like getting the initial impression and it being unpolluted by later reflection. There's a concern with like authenticity, that like the more abstract ideas are something dubious post hoc rationalizations, or the first impression that's the real thing, which is interesting. I wonder.
Wow, yeah, Ray, that's really good, man. That was your article right there to write. Is that passage? There's your peer-reviewed literary journal essay. God, yeah,
By the way, that's a theme that happens in Nausea.
yeah.
It's talked about there too. So not totally original to me, but like it's there.
Well, I mean, not all papers, you can just write.
Fair
You don't have
enough.
to think about this novel. Yeah, no, I think that preoccupation because like this is complicated. Part of what makes this novel so brilliant is we're immediately going into philosophy and interpretation world, but he's such a clear writer.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
simple. Like, and yet it's so philosophically rich, and we're just all over the place with super deep interpretations, but they all feel like they're there, and yet it also feels like he's not trying at all. It's so effortless.
yeah. I mean, that's one thing we can say about Nausea is Sartre is trying.
Sartre's always trying,
I think
man. Sartre's
Sartre is
just like
trying.
Sartre is the writer with a chip on his shoulder all the time.
Yeah.
But in this so to reinterpret what you're saying, and then I think that's about all I have to say on this book for now, leaving it kind of open and evocative for people to go and read because it's a fantastic read. I think that what he does is he locates earnestness at some point as like a duration. Like at some point on the chain of thoughts, he goes, "This is where earnestness was." And that's different from my thought process, where I think of it as a landing point. Like I usually think of like, okay, like, and probably this is because we're both like PhD people, but like I go and I think about it and I get all of my like, okay, I'm gonna go look at the evidence, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna use all of that to eventually form a conclusion.
Mhm.
And that's basically the exact opposite of what Duarte just did. And that's kind of interesting, right? You
Yeah,
know,
but just like stepping back from the novel in a certain
yeah, yeah.
sense is I really enjoyed this and I thought it was very accessible
Yeah.
altogether as a work of art. Uh, but one thing I want to say is I do think like Asleep in the Sun and particularly Zama, they were better books overall. Like I felt like they had just isn't I liked this more, but I felt like there was kind of more just I don't know metaphysical oomph to the other ones. Like there was just more like striking images and the personalities came off more strongly and there was that like mystic energy in the air and that uncanniness like it was here too and I think he did a really great job with the
Yeah.
book but
Well, I
I
think
yeah.
he might on that. The part I'll give him a lot of credit for is like he's arriving back home, and in this particular village, you have to go through the cemetery first. And he goes, "I hated to arrive home this way, alone in the night, greeted first by my dead." Like, ooh, that's really good. I think that like there's a spectrum of writers in relationship to metaphor and imagery. I think on this end you have more of a matter of fact, I'll put. And then on the other end you have like Han Kang who just won the Nobel, or like well, every other Spanish language writer we've read relies more on metaphor, on imagery, on the turtles, God, the animal stuff, all these sorts of like, but also it's not just one thing. Caceres is always doing a lot with language, and I think Cela is doing storyline. Like he's doing the character is great. Like the main character, obviously, we talked like an hour about the entire existence of just this one character, and so it's more on the line of narrative and character. But what it doesn't have a lot of, if it was a video game stat, is poetics.
Yeah.
That poetics, whereas in all the other magical realism, brutalism, absurdism, all those other writers, they rely equally on poetics.
Mm.
And the reason why I would to give it a little saving grace, because I actually liked this more, which is weird because I don't know. I think I liked this more because I felt like it wasn't relying on poetics as a device to tell it. And sometimes in not the Caceres, but sometimes in the Benedetto, I felt like he was playing around. Like the Benedetto novel, there are moments of images and moments of stuff where it's like, okay, we're having fun. This is weird. But there was no moment in this book that I could take off. Or,
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
no
it's
additions or subtractions on this book. It's just kind of perfect for me.
yeah, no, I feel that makes sense to me. I'd have to reread De Benedetto to get clear like because there is a lot of stuff that could arguably be cut um from that book.
On the flip side, this may not be an aesthetic question. This could be a question of values. If the type of
Yeah.
world you want to live in is that rich, sumptuous, fascinating life, then, Caceres is it. Like Caceres has the world itself is very fascinating. I think that Cela doesn't present that type of world in terms of values. I think it's a harsher world.
Well, one thing I'll say about Caceres, just
Yeah.
on some level, is I do just like his protagonists. Like they're nice people.
Really nice.
But
I
like
know.
they're just like they're very deeply confused people who who you would not rely upon to fill a glass of water, but they mean well. They have like
Yeah.
affections. They don't go around killing people.
Do you have more of what like you'd call like an imaginary identification? Like, do you like all the people in the bookstore? I would say, like, people buying new books. There's a type of reader where they really enjoy the book. Why? Oh, because they could see themselves in the main character. There's some sort of, oh, I can, at least I can get into the head of the main character and be that person for a bit. And I think Caceres, I can do that. Duarte, I was just watching him like a piece of music. I wasn't really like, oh yeah, man, I would have done something different at that point. I mean, what the hell? So, but Caceres, you do. You have that sort of like, there's a slightly more normal neuroticism to him, which you can just, yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's more
Oh.
human. It's more friendly. Um,
Yeah, it's more of a world that you could live in.
yeah, and it's also just. I mean, one else just thing is just like I just like the details of his world more. I liked just all of the little neurotic things. This one wasn't. This one would get more caught up in sort of philosophical descriptions, or at least like descriptions of motives and all of that. Like it got more into that, which is good. That's great for a writer to do. I mean, that's one approach, but it didn't have nearly as much of that, like as you were mentioning, that just like poetic richness, that those sort of startling
Mhm.
images that make you pause.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that really goes to like, again, not like a my dog, not like the mail's coming. He has to stop yelling. Bentley,
You can hear your dog.
you can't hear him?
Yeah.
Oh, well then I'll just ignore him. So, um, I think that like, if we were in a writer's workshop, if I was the teacher, I would say you just have to decide what type of world you want to inhabit. Or if you want your writing to be a reflection of the world you want to inhabit, I think these are all questions that any beginning writer and any writer, I think you have to answer. I think it does go a little beyond quality. I mean, I think these are all good writers.
Yeah.
I don't really have like a, yeah, Cela really needs to work on his poetics. Like,
No, it's a completely
not
valid
really
place
on
to
that
be. It's a
level.
completely valid place to be. I'm just saying.
It's not a craft question. It's a value question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do feel like which one do I feel like I want to return to of it? Even though like this was so easy to read, the Cela, it's like yeah, I rather go back to Cazareus. He just feels like there's more stuff to grab onto, and I will say this is a little bit of a complaint, just a little bit. I found some of the metaphors to be a little bit like over dramatic at times. Um, like just some of the ones that are quoted, like it's like um, okay, I like this, but it also just feels a little too much almost. It's like the idea of death comes upon us with the slow gait of a wolf or the tarrying glide of a serpent, like any and all of our dead dread imagings, like all dreadful ideas which hurl us to the ground. Like that's good. I do think that's good. I'm just saying I've seen better. Like it just feels a
Yeah.
little too like yeah, okay, a serpent gliding on the ground. That's good. That's good. Like
Well, I wonder,
B. I give you a B.
yeah, I wonder, I mean, I have a lot of questions about that. I really want to ask a person, because this is like, apparently people read this in school. Like, this is like a big Spanish 20th century novel. Like, everyone reads it in college, it's Spanish, or even high school, like AP Lit classes in Spain. Everyone reads
Crazy.
this nihilistic text. But like,
I mean,
I think,
I guess it's not that much different than I don't know reading Catcher in the Rye or what the fuck else did I read? I mean, I
no, I
don't
mean, Of Mice and Men has a lot of violence that's not.
Well,
as
Advice and Men is okay. I mean, that's a very tragic story, but it's a very moralistic kind of.
yeah, I don't actually, let me rephrase that. No.
It's a very
Yeah. Okay.
it's
Yeah,
like
that's a bad
very
comparison.
straightforward emotions there.
Yeah.
Now, I will also don't say Salinger. I love Salinger in a big way, but like it is kind of the first time I read Catcher in the Rye, I was like, this is kind of grossed out, frankly, by a lot of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's a great novel in terms of its craftsmanship, but I also like, I felt the same way now that I did in high school, which is like, well, yeah, he's kind of a loser.
No, I
And
do
I
feel it's, and I actually have a very high level, high opinion of it, like on an emotional level. Like, no, like Holden Caulfield is this is an important person to learn about and his attitude and this adolescent confusion. That's a big deal. I like Franny and Zooey better. As
Yeah, that's
well.
a great
Like,
one. That's
yeah,
that's my favorite.
yeah.
Yeah.
That
But
one. Yeah, yeah. Back to
no, no,
business.
I'm gonna go with you. I totally I would but I think what I have a question for a Spanish language writer is so we're assuming a level in the translation of some of the things he says. And I there are points in this novel where it's like, okay, so like a poor, almost illiterate peasant is writing this book, right?
Mhm.
And that produces like some translation issues I think we've never read, which is like, okay, what if in Spanish that passage is super funny because of how over the top it is?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and then I just realized, wait, we can't know that, but that makes the novel a problem where I think it'd be a great novel to take a class on because the Spanish language teacher would be like, okay, you're not getting this, guys. There's actually some really funny thing happening here, or some really tragic thing. Because yeah, I would agree. That was a B, you know? And I also think there's, especially the mother passage, there's a whole lot when he gets fixated on the mom.
Mhm.
There's a lot of language like that. And I would also agree. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
You know,
But anyway, all together, really good book, really good time.
weird dude. I love it. Um,
So what's your takeaway? How did this traumatize you? How did this cut open reality for you?
I think so. I was reading like Goodreads reviews of this book because like it's just fun when you have something so violent to like, and all the one-star reviews, of course, are like, it's so violent. There's nothing but the violence, and you're like, okay, like I think that for me,
This is
what
such a weird take, I have to say. Is like, yeah, books have violence in them. This isn't even like particularly, I mean, bad violence. It's not American Psycho.
no,
Uh,
it's not American Psycho. I also think that like if you ever have a long afternoon, just look up one-star reviews of books you love and just rage. It's awesome. So I was kind of raging a little bit at the one-star reviews of this, but then I was thinking like, it's not edgelordy in Bret Easton Ellis, obviously, but it is in the sense that it forces one to confront the arbitrariness of horror in a sense. And I found that really compelling, the sense that like, wow, he's taking things as fate, but really existentially, there's this ambiguity in his identity that's really brutal and horrifying. And I really liked that. I really liked how arbitrariness and fate somehow coincide based on perspective. That was what I got, and I loved
yeah,
it.
yeah, what it's similar for me. Like I enjoyed this ambiguity about this person we are reading, and like why what is the actual truth of these confessions, and even like the most important part of his life we don't even get like a conversation about. It's just alluded to, and it's a mystery to the other people. Like why the hell did he kill Jesus? What was going on here?
Yeah.
Like that, just the feeling of like, here's an incomplete document from a mentally ill man who is saying something, but you can't. Is this a genuine belief? Is this a rationalization? What is this? And it's similar to it's nice in its ambiguity, even more so than like Lolita, where it's like, okay, yeah, he's he did some pretty bad stuff, Humbert, and like it's he's trying to make it sound very nice.
Yeah. But I think your original comparison between those two novels is spot on.
Mm.
It's you can't just go into a room and say it has an unreliable narrator. It's like what flavor of unreliable narrator? You know, those have a similar flavor.
Yeah, I feel like it's like there's I mean, there's an unreliable that has nothing to do with it. Is like one of Beckett's from the trilogy, like Malloy or Malone. It's like it's explicitly unreliable, and it's like it's by an individual who's just has no memory of the things that have happened in his life, and he's very clear
Yeah.
about that, and he's not sure if he's remembering any of it accurately, and it's the perspective of dementia basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's so that's a different kind of unreliable narration. At least this one has like normal human faculties on a cognitive level, if not on a emotional level. But yeah, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this as a document.
Um, I also like as a last note, the one thing to talk about really quick is why do you think no one knows about this guy? So like, but all the other Spanish people, they're like super weird, right? Like they're fine. You know, De Benedetto is exactly as famous as I want him to be, with us literary people reading him and having a great time. They keep reprinting more of his stuff on presses I love. Great. Same thing with Caceres. It's like great. You know, he's fine, and I love him, and he's a great writer. But I can also see why he doesn't have mass appeal. Cela's totally different. Cela is like it's like Harper Lee, in Spain. And so it's so weird when you even Google him, it's like, there it's so much less crossover. And do you think there's a reason for that?
I feel. I mean, okay,
It's
just
like everyone in Spain knows who this guy is.
yeah, just speculation. I'd say one thing is that maybe it's a little bit of like uh, non-Spanish saturation of this author. Of us like, yeah, okay, we got Marquez, we got Caceres, we got
We're forgetting the biggest one. Um,
Marquez.
no, no, bigger in terms of just Spanish language literature.
Jorge? Or
No, I would even argue bigger, more contemporary with Cela. Um, Chile at night. Oh, Bolaño. We haven't done Bolaño yet, but Bolaño is probably the biggest seller.
okay. It might just be a little bit of like
We're
okay,
good. We have enough people.
because for me personally, I probably never would have read Cela.
Yeah.
Because I would be like, I got enough of these Latin American guys. I think I'm kind of good. For this, that was my sense of it. Of I know this abstraction, and I mean, I will sort of say it's like, yeah, he fits fairly snugly into it. And another thing might just be just like I don't know. Sometimes they're just accidents. So like I don't know. It just didn't come out at the right time for Western audiences for it to be canonized.
I think all of those are possibilities. I think another possibility is that I think in the last 40 years we we've gotten a little narrow-minded about which writers we're allowed to read. So like a lot of my favorite writers have a really big tension in them where they're like right wingers and I'm a left winger. And so it's kind of so like Malaparte, Celine, Cela, those three writers, I love all three of them quite a bit. But I think like, I work at a bookstore and it's fairly left wing and people are like, oh, well, why would I ever buy a right wing writer? And it's like, well, the writing's not right wing. You know what I mean? There's sort of, but I think that like these are all, he was a bad guy. He outed left wing revolutionaries. And I think that there might be an English language audience that takes that too seriously
Yeah,
almost.
maybe
You
that's a
know,
contributor. Like
maybe a little PC.
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
That might be more of the thing I
That's just
would know.
me like not knowing things about the world.
I'm more in the book world, and I think that that definitely shows up. And then you have writers that show up because people are tired of it. So then you have, you know, oh, I hate these social norms. Can't I just break out? And then you have like, you have people breaking out of the PC. And it's not just PC. That's way too local of a phenomena. But like something, something there. I don't know. I don't have a good answer either. I was just curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah. I have no answer. All right, but anyway, so this has been great, Chris.
Mhm.
And yeah, so next time we'll be doing some Gunther Grass, the Tin Drum, or not? No, wait, yes, the Tin Drum part. We'll do like then two parts.
Sounds good.
All right.